Welcome to 7.9's Math Moment. Today, students continued to work with percents, except today they were learning about the percent of a number. So, what is 50% of 12? What is 65% of 100? Working with those and how that connects with math. So we're going to look at a couple of examples today, but before we get started, some nice key words that you can have your student look at when they are trying to work with a word problem. Sometimes the problem's going to be set up and it's just going to say 67% of 100 or 600, or it's going to come out really simply. But sometimes it might be in a word problem and they might be confused about how they're supposed to set the problem up. So something that we tell students is, when you see the word is, that means equals. Okay? 2 plus 2 equals 4. 2 plus 2 is 4. When you see the word of, it means to multiply. And then when you have the percent, you always want to change that into a decimal. So that can kind of help your student work with these word problems and how to set it up. So let's take a look. It says, of the 250 students, so we have 250 students at a middle school, 94% say that they will attend the party. How many students is this? So how many students does this equal? So I have got 94% of 250. I don't want to do 250% of 94. We need to look for that percent. Just because the 250 comes first, I've got to think about what percent of the whole do I need. And I want 94% of 250 people. All right, and then I know my equals, and I need to figure it out, so that's where my variable belongs. So the other thing that we need to look at is that whenever I have a percent, I need to change it to a decimal. Well, a percent is always out of 100, so it would be 94 hundredths would be 94%. So we change it to 94 hundredths of equals is the same as multiply, and then I've got 250. So now this turns it into a really easy math problem that we can solve. I just need to solve 250 times 94 hundredths. Now, when we're working with multiplication of decimals, I multiply just like I normally would. So I'm going to take 4 times 0, which is 0, 4 times 5, which is 20, carry my 2, 4 times 2, which is 8, plus 2 is 10. I'm done with my 4, so I'm adding a 0. 9 times 0 is 0. 9 times 5 is 45, carry my 4. 9 times 2 is 18, plus 4 is 22. I'm going to add what I have together. And I'm left with 235 because I need to move my decimal 2 spots over. Since I have 2 numbers behind the decimal in my problem, I need to have 2 numbers behind my decimal in my answer. So my answer becomes 235. Now, before I decide that that's my final answer, I need to think about the original problem and make sure it makes sense. Is 235 students really close to 250? We always want the students to think about the percent. 94 is really close to 100. So whatever I get as my answer should be really close to my 250. And 235 is fairly close to 250, so that helps me know that my answer is reasonable. Let's take a look at example 2. Example 2 is really nicely set up for us because it's just a plain problem. We don't have to set it up or really think it through as much as a word problem would be. So what is my variable? Is stands for equal. 67% I'm going to change into a decimal. Of is times, which I could write as an x, or, so we don't confuse it with this x, we'll write it as a dot, 600. So just by thinking about what each word means in math, I was able to set that problem up very easily. So now I need to take 600 times 67 hundredths to get my answer x. And again, I'm thinking of 67% of 600. So we'll want to think about what that is when we get our answer. Now, this problem, I would probably want to take the zeros off and add them back on just to make my multiplication a little bit easier to work with. So 6 times 7 is 42. 6 times 6 is 36, plus 4 is 40. Then I need to add my 2 zeros, since I took them off to begin with. And then I need 2 numbers behind the decimal, since I have 2 numbers behind the decimal in my problem. So my answer becomes 402. Now, before I decide that's my answer, no problem at all, I need to look back and think. 67, how close is that to 100? Well, it's a little bit more than half, but it's not super close to 100. So my answer should be more than half of this, but not super close. And 402 is more than half of 600, and it's still far enough away to make sense with 67%. So again, just looking at that and really thinking about if the answer is reasonable or not. If you have any other questions about lesson 7.9, make sure to see your math teacher.